Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Joe Patrick on Football here on 929 The Game's YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Joe Patrick. I'm 929 The Game's Falcons insider and reporter since 2022 when I started covering the team, and training camp continues. We are actually, shockingly, we're 1 week away from the Falcons' first preseason game against the Lions, which will be played tonight, although it will have already been played when you're listening to this because you'll hear it on Friday. I'm recording this Thursday after practice. So, make sure you go back and scout the Lions when they're in the Hall of Fame game, because they will be coming to Atlanta next Friday to play this Falcons team, and they continue to get ready. I was at the training ground, or the practice facility today. And let's just get underway with some news and notes from what happened today. First of all, before practice, we got an update from Raheem Morris on Jalen Walker, who told us that Jalen is reportedly dealing with a minor hamstring injury, according to Raheem. I've never really been all that concerned about Walker. He's been kind of, I think, active in his recovery. He's been seen, I guess, by people. I can't go into too much detail about it, but this is one where I've never really been all that concerned about the long-term prognosis for him. The team has been relatively coy about it, and I think that they finally addressed it today because I think they saw that, potentially there were some people who were kind of wondering if maybe it was something more than what it was. And considering they see it as minor, they wanted to just go ahead and snuff that out. But of course, I did want to just remind everybody that the team is not really obligated to say anything about any injuries. They can hold players out for whatever reason and don't necessarily have to say anything about it. Of course, I think it gives everybody a level of comfort and security when they do kind of address it head on and tell the fans what is going on. So anyways, in Jalen Walker's case, he is dealing with a minor hamstring injury. He was actually a participant in practice today. He only did individual drills. He did that at full speed. He looked really good to me. And I would expect him to become a full participant in practices probably starting on Monday. The team will be practicing again. They'll have the weekend off, and then they'll go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, heading into the Friday preseason game. I would expect him, assuming all goes well, for him to rejoin those practices in full on Monday. That's just me projecting, but there you go. Another little practice. So the interesting thing about practice today, the way that the team was practicing, the orientation they had to where the media is, they had the team kind of lined up with their backs in front, or the team, like the players who were not playing, were lined up basically between where the play was going and where media was. So it was really, really hard to tell. And so the only kind of notes I have is I was able to see one Drake London diving catch on the right side of the field where there was a gap where you could see around the players. Natron Brooks had his first interception and the team's first interception of Michael Penix during training camp. Pretty interesting considering all the talk from pundits about Michael Penix's accuracy issues, that we finally have his first interception of training camp on the fifth day or the fifth practice day or whatever it is today. Just to describe the play a little bit, if you haven't seen it, I did see a video of it circulating on social media. I'm not permitted to repost that stuff, and I'm not sure if it's still up by the time you guys are listening to this. So if you have not seen it, Penix was going to London. It was a 2-minute drill situation. So I think there was 25 seconds left on the clock. Team was probably at about the 20-ish yard line or so. And I think that they were probably, clearly in this case, Penix was taking a shot to the end zone, trying to see if he could connect with Drake and kind of put it up for him. And he just underthrew a fade, basically, to that back pylon. Just underthrew it. And so not a good throw, should be said. And Natron Brooks was able to get his head turned around, had position on Drake. Drake tried to kind of go over the top and do that kind of catch, but Natron Brooks came down with it and was super hyped about it. And I think that just in general, it was a good day for the Falcons defense today. And again, good to see them kind of bouncing back. What we've basically seen for the most part throughout training camp is kind of offense has a good day, defense comes back, offense has a good day, defense comes back. And that's what the coaches have been saying is kind of what good teams do typically in training camp. If you subscribe to this kind of narrative theory of, one side winning each different practice session. And then the only other note I really had was just kind of noting that Kirk Cousins doing a great job of organizing the team and efficiently operating the offense. He's running the scout team against the first team defense, but just just a really good job. He's got those guys kind of operating really well. And we're going to get into a little bit more about kind of the benefits the Falcons can get from having a quarterback like Kirk Cousins as the scout team quarterback. One of the big things for me today, kind of just in talking to some of the players after the practice, we got to talk to several defensive players, Brandon Dorlus, James Pearce Jr., and Jesse Bates all today, and that's on top of having talked to Zach Harrison on Tuesday. When these guys talk about Jeff Ulbrich, I mean, they can't, especially when they're asked questions like about comparing things to last year when Jimmy Lake was the incoming defensive coordinator for that team. They're not going to obviously just like outwardly slander Jimmy Lake and like the ideas that he had and the way that he kind of managed them, coach to player. But you can tell just by this kind of smile they get on their face that they are really, really excited to play for Jeff Ulbrich. And I think that they just see it as a much better situation for them to go out there and make plays and just to have fun playing defense, first of all. But I think that they also understand that they back themselves. They believe in themselves and that they're going to be able to go out there and make plays. I think I repeated the quote from Zach Harrison on the previous podcast, not today's podcast with Bo Morgan, but the previous one, where he talked about Ulbrich basically trusting in them to go use their superpowers, whatever their superpowers are as players, to go use them to the greatest extent possible to go win. And it reminds me, I mean, Jeff Ulbrich basically told us this when he was hired. I can't remember. I think it may have been in his introductory press conference. If not, it was at one of the coaching availabilities. But he said, listen, you can draw up plays as a defensive coordinator and try to scheme things, but ultimately, this game, especially on the defensive side of the football, comes down to just having the better players, like and having those players win their one-on-one matchups. Like, can you think of a defense that's kind of been elevated above their level of talent by the scheme? Not really. That can happen, I think, on the offensive side of the football, and because for different reasons. But when you're playing defense, you're kind of reacting, and you have to have certain athletic gifts and certain abilities to just do things that allow you to win in those one-on-ones. And where I think the players are very happy for that to kind of be the MO for the way that this Falcons defense goes. And one of those players who's winning their one-on-one so far is James Pearce Jr. I mean, that's gone should go unsaid because I'm sure you guys have seen all the reports that have been coming out from everybody basically about what he's doing in this training camp, and it really is good. I kind of hesitate to kind of declare sacks again, like this we've talked about on the stats. I don't really kind of keep the quarterback stats specifically just because I don't have confidence that I would get those stats correct, and I'm not sure how they reflect on the actual evaluation of the quarterback in this instance. I also, since the defenders can't touch the quarterbacks, I'm hesitant to kind of say like that was a sack, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, nothing against. I'm actually glad that there are people who will go so far as to kind of point those things out. But James Pearce, he's just a guy who they put him on the left side, they put him on the right side. He's gone up against McGarry, he's gone up against Jake Matthews, he's gone up against Storm Norton. Doesn't really seem to matter who he's going up against. He gives them all fits because he has these traits. And I'll go back to, something I said. I believe I talked about this a little bit with Bo Morgan. I believe, maybe not, but I've definitely talked about it before, where I just have this theory that Terry Fontenot, like one of the reasons why he wanted to draft Michael Penix, why the team was so attracted to Michael Penix in particular, was because he had without getting to Liam Neeson on this, a very particular set of skills, but like a very like certain physical gifts that just can't be coached. Like you can't improve those things over time. They're just kind of, you either have them or you don't. And with Michael Penix, that's just the throwing ability, not even just the throw power, but it's like, it's not like how far he can throw it, but the velocity, the way he gets the ball out. I tweeted the other day, the way he's able to just snap off that 20-yard deep out route is really special. And that's just something he has. And then I think that the coaching staff kind of, and Terry Fontenot as the general manager, when he's selecting these players, thinks these are the players we need to prioritize with our top picks, and we will coach up their deficiencies. And I think that is also kind of the feeling with James Pearce Jr., where he just has this just special speed rush ability, this ability to get off the snap and just linear direct line to the quarterback. He's just special at that. And he as kind of longer, leaner defensive end. He's going to have deficiencies in some other areas, whether that's run stopping, whatever it might be. But I think that the coaching staff is either willing to deal with those deficiencies, those physical deficiencies, or be able to coach up some of the deficiencies to the point where they're not such weaknesses for him going forward. But in the immediate term, he is able to use his strengths in ways that allow him to win immediately against starting tackles in this league. And I always say when I, introduce myself on the podcast, I've been covering the team since 2022. That 2022 training camp, that first training camp, I was able to witness with my own eyes. I saw an edge like Arnold Ebiketie, who the team traded up in the second round to get at the time, and you could see he was struggling. You could see that he was just struggling to deal, I think, with the size and power profile of these professional offensive tackles. Like Caleb McGarry was able to, once he got his hands on him, AK struggled with that. And I think that AK has gotten a lot better. He's gotten better with his get off. He's gotten better at dealing with guys when they do get hands on him, and able to kind of have these secondary and tertiary moves. But, James Pearce Jr. is not struggling in the way that I saw that with Arnold Ebiketie. So that's great news for the Falcons, especially considering we haven't even really seen much of the player they drafted ahead of James Pearce Jr., which was Jalen Walker. And so, if you get anything like that, I think they're very different players. I should kind of just say that from the outset. Like, Jalen Walker is not that kind of like high torque. I don't know. He's special in his own way, and we'll see more of him. I've only seen him for one practice playing against other NFL players. But he's clearly got a different skill set than James Pearce Jr., is what I'm trying to say. And I've said this since the offseason. I think I've been on the Falcoholic and some other podcasts, talked about it on the radio on 92.9 The Game, saying that I've always felt like James Pearce Jr. was better set up to be the more productive of the two edge rushers in terms of the sacks, in terms of the pressures in the sacks, especially on a per play basis when they're playing. Because I think that, well, at least my thought process coming into training camp was that James Pearce Jr. was going to be more of the designated pass rusher. He was going to get the premium opportunities to, again, use these physical gifts that he has to get to the quarterback. And I still think that's going to be the case. I still think that he's going to, when he's on the field, Falcons going to have a pretty good idea of what the opposition is going to be trying to do. And I think that that's going to allow James Pearce Jr. to have some really good opportunities to rush the passer and use his gifts. We also talked to him after practice, as I said earlier, and I got to say, every time he's talked, which has been a few times since he got drafted, just come away really impressed. Yeah, and not surprised, I guess, but like you come away thinking you can't help but after you talk to him to think about the detractors basically that he had around the draft and all that kind of conversation that was happening. And it's all kind of vague about like exactly what the issue with him was. Some say he wasn't interested in football. They were like, that's the kind of thing that we heard. And the interest in football thing seems completely wrong given the way that he's spoken, the way his teammates have spoken about him, the way his coaches have spoken about him. That seems totally wrong. When he's spoken with media, he's been incredibly pleasant. Like, he's not like being rude in any sort of way. He's short with his answers. Like, he's not going to go on, but like, good. Especially for someone in radio, honestly. It's like, we want the kind of like nice tight clips, and that's exactly what James Pearce Jr. gives us. But no, I'm kind of joking in that respect. I like when players elaborate and kind of get deep into the thought process. But if he's not that guy, he's not that guy. And he shouldn't be pressured into being that guy. And I don't think he is. And I think that things are going well. And he's talked about the scuffles. Like today, he talked about the fights that, he was kind of at the center of on Sundays. His first time talking since then. And he said exactly what you would hope, which is that, no bad feeling, no ill will towards teammates. We're all just trying to get better. These are the kinds of things that naturally happen when you have two players or two sides of the ball that are both trying to get better. You got guys competing, tempers flare, and it is what it is. Yeah, after practice, you break bread with the guys. You have that bond, and I think that everybody can respect that. And speaking of respect, Jesse Bates was talking after practice today about James Pearce. He said he's a rookie that is not afraid to touch the aux cord, which is not something that rookies typically feel the cojones, I guess, to do in a professional locker room, especially this early in training camp. But I don't think like James Pearce Jr. He just doesn't strike me as someone who like considers himself. I shouldn't say doesn't consider himself a rookie, but he just doesn't consider himself as like less than because he's a rookie, if that makes sense. He just considers himself just as much a part of the team as somebody who's been around for 10 years. And you can understand why, in certain locker rooms with certain players, the 10-year vet might take kind of some offense to that. But nobody on this Falcons team seems to. I think that everybody's kind of been very accepting of James Pearce Jr. And I think that he's fitting in great. And and the thing that Jesse Bates said, to get back to that, is that he's not afraid to touch the aux cord, and then he goes out and practices hard as hell. That was the quote from Jesse Bates, and that's exactly what you want to hear about the way that James Pearce is performing. So that's really good to hear. I think he's just been basically a home run to this point in every respect, both with the performance on the field, with what he's done, and then also the way that he's interacted with media. I was going to say the way he's interacted with teammates. Yeah, I would even say it's a home run in that respect, because even though there have been the fights, I'm sure that, guys on the offensive side of the ball have been pissed off at him, in the midst of practices, obviously, clearly, like we saw. He, took Matthew Bergeron's helmet off, but then after that, we talked to Bergeron on Tuesday, and he was like loving it. He's like, yeah, I love it when it gets chippy. I love that, and he was saying that there's, no ill will. We got to be ready for this kind of ball. We got to be chippy when week one comes against a division rival. So, yeah, I think it's just all going basically swimmingly, or as swimmingly as it possibly could go, basically, at this point. And I think, knock on wood, we haven't seen this team play a game yet, but I think a lot of pundits could be eating a lot of crow on this based on the way that they were reacting to what the Falcons did in that draft. But we'll see. I want to touch on the kicking competition today before we get out here for the weekend, because this is something that we started to see a little bit of this kicking competition kind of crop up this week with Lenny Craig and Younghoe Koo both going kind of toe to toe against each other. Kind of kicking back to back, getting the same opportunities. And I think from the count, Craig has missed one kick and Koo has missed two, I believe, of the 10 that they've taken so far. Listen, Lenny Craig has looked really impressive. Like, again, making 9 out of his first 10 or whatever it is really good. And not only are those numbers good, but like when you just see it visually, like the ball flies. The reports are not exaggerated of just how strong that leg is, which is great. But here's kind of my statement on this. It may be controversial, but like, I don't think Lenny Craig can actually win this competition. I do think that Younghoe Koo can lose it. And that's how Lenny Craig could ultimately be this team's kicker at some point this season, whether it's in game one or sometime in the future. But there's a certain aspect of kicking that you just cannot test in a competition. Coaches try to build the pressure as much as they can. The team has to run if you don't make these kicks. I don't think they actually fine them, but like, you can try to do things. You can get in their ear and like talk to them and say all this stuff. You can even kind of, privately, you could say that, like, listen, your job's on the line today. If you don't make these kicks, I don't think they would go that far. Because there is something totally different. Even if you were to go to that extent to say, like, we're going to cut you if you don't make this many kicks, or whatever it is. I'm just obviously making that up. But even that, I don't think actually replicates the feeling of kicking when your team has just marched down the field after a long, knockdown, drag them out game, and you've got a 55-yard field goal with 1 second left on the clock to win this thing for your team. I don't think anything can replicate that experience. And Younghoe Koo has had that experience and succeeded in that experience before. A 22-year-old, Lenny Craig, who's a converted soccer player, it's hard for me to see this team having like that level of confidence where they're just saying, wow, he knocked it out of the park so much. Even though Koo was good, even though he was like pretty good, Lenny Craig was just so much better. He's going to be our starter. We're going to cut Koo. I just don't see that happening. I think Lenny Craig can have a great training camp, make every kick. And as long as Koo, I think, is decent, I think that the team would go into the season with Koo as their starter. And one of the reasons I think this is because Lenny Craig is not costing this team a slot. They don't have to cut Lenny Craig if they don't want him as a kicker. If they want to go with Koo, Lenny Craig just stays as their international in their international slot, whatever the hell it's called in the NFL nowadays. But that slot is not a practice squad slot. But it doesn't count against the 90-man roster or the 53-man, but they get to basically keep the player. So as long as Koo is like relatively decent, I think the team is going to roll with him. So we'll see how it goes. I think it's still definitely worth watching both of these guys to see how they're performing, but that's just kind of my take on the situation. Last thing I want to talk about before we get out of here is, I think it's kind of interesting that the scout team quarterback situation on this team. I know it's kind of a niche topic here, but because I asked Jesse Bates, when you were seeing Michael Penix last year as the team's scout team quarterback with Kirk Cousins as the starter and taking all those reps. I asked him like when he realized, or if there's a moment that stands out to him of like, wow, like this guy has it. This guy's got the goods. And I didn't really get a direct answer because he just said that there was so many of those. like I think it became pretty commonplace pretty much immediately that he could make so many different types of throws. Michael Penix could. I'm talking about, and I think that gives these current guys, all of his teammates, really at this point, a ton of confidence in him coming into this season. On top of the 3 games that we saw from him last year, and I think that was also important for his teammates to see. We've heard from some of the guys say that they believed in him after that first Giants game where he was able to kind of go through that process of taking over the starting quarterback job and run through practice smoothly that week and blow out the Giants in that game. But it was interesting from Jesse to just hear just like, pretty much immediately. And we've also heard an interview with Justin Simmons, one of the team safeties last year, saying that like in training camp, Michael Penix made one of the best throws he's ever seen in his life, which just goes to show you the arm talent. And not that anybody, I think, listening to this needs explaining on the arm talent that Michael Penix has. I think actually, like the reason I want to bring this up is to go back to Kirk Cousins, what I was talking about earlier in the podcast, with him leading the twos, the backup offense, basically in the hurry up against the first team defense, and how much that helps everybody. Like I think it helps the offensive players obviously show the best of themselves. We're seeing David Sills, for example, kind of stand out as a kind of a crafty route runner. He's actually getting fed by a good quarterback that can actually reward him for some of those things that he does on the field. Jesse Bates described the fact that, it helps to have a quarterback that we're going up against, the ones are going up against, who knows exactly how to check when he sees us in certain, alignments and in certain things. When he sees us in a cover 0, Kirk knows exactly how to check out of that and exactly what routes to look for, and exactly how to kind of understand that what we're in, basically, and play as well as he can against us. And that just is like, it's the iron sharpens iron mantra. It's just like that's the kind of thing that actually makes you better. It doesn't really make you that much better if you think you're having success because, you're putting some substandard rookie quarterback in a tizzy with like, disguised defense or whatnot, and they're just kind of throwing the ball away, because that's not the level of competition at quarterback you're going to see during the regular season. Frankly, Kirk Cousins is a lot better quarterback than some of the quarterbacks that the Falcons will be seeing during this regular season. So it's great to have him to go against. And then lastly, while it's good for the offense, good for the defense, I also think it's good for the front office to better evaluate all these players. You can better evaluate the defensive players and how they're going against a player like Kirk Cousins. Again, to kind of go back to the David Sills example, you can get better understanding of some of these pass catchers and how they'll able to be effective. So I think it helps them as well. So again, it kind of plays into this understanding that we've now had for a while, which is that there is value to having a player like Kirk Cousins as your backup quarterback. And I know that Kirk Cousins is the last one who would want to hear that, but there is. And that's why the Falcons are not just going to give him up for nothing, basically. That was what the argument that a lot of people were making around free agency, was that the Falcons should just cut him and basically get nothing back for him. That, like, cutting him literally wouldn't have done anything. That was never on the table. And even when it comes to a trade, I think a team would really have to kind of, blow the Falcons' doors off with an offer. And maybe a team could do that, if they lose their starting quarterback and, they feel like they have to get Kirk Cousins to save their season, then maybe a team does do that. Maybe at that point the Falcons do find it worthwhile. But as of right now, It's hard for me to see that. And it's great insurance, like if they were to get rid of him and Michael Penix goes down, then your season is really, really in jeopardy, where this team is trying to break a 7-year playoff-less drought. And having a solid quarterback gives you a lot of security for the entirety of the team going forward this season. So there's that. Again, thank you guys so much for listening, hanging with us. 1 week until the Falcons are on the field in Mercedes-Benz Stadium against the Lions. Really looking forward to that, but they will have practice Monday through Wednesday ahead of time. We'll be back with you guys for all 5 days of the week next week. We'll see you then.